Okay, I will call the policy committee, Willington Board of Education Policy Committee to order. It's March 28th at 7 p.m. And we have a couple things, three things on our agenda tonight for new business. We have three policies: bullying, reporting child abuse and neglect or sexual assault of students by school employees, and sexual discrimination and sexual harassment. So I mentioned last time that these policies are what I'll say very legal. Obviously we're required to have them, but also the legal language that we need to have in these policies is really important. I'm going to put the first one up on the screen for you so you can see it in 1 second, which is bullying. Perfect. All right, so again, when we go through these policies, anything in red is new, and the cross out is obviously something that would be removed. And just real quick overview of this policy. This is the policy. We have a regulation that basically I adjust once you have an approved and updated policy. So the regulation is more along the lines of the application of the policy at the school level. So how does it work? And so this basically says, you can't bully. And then the regulation says what happens, and it goes into specifics about reporting and investigations and things like that. So your job is really the policy portion. This policy did go to the attorney already. And she basically said, everything in red is, good. You want it there. It's the things that are updated. She updated some of the process there. She put in red, and we can talk about the specifics in a minute. And then there is a small section on prevention and intervention, but I'll tell you again, the reg has a lot more. And then she updated the statutes. And anytime you want to look at the statutes, you can go into this. There's they have all the statutes online, and you can just click any of the things, and there's sections on there. Any of these things, whether it's recess, there's obviously something on bullying in here. It's one of the things that they have statute on, safety plans, everything. So you can see that. Get back to where I was. And that's it. So where would you like to start with this policy?
I can't read the red part, actually.
Can you see?
But I have the policy in front of me, so maybe
Okay.
that'll. Most of it's, the first paragraph is new, is that right?
Correct. And it's basically just with the updated kind of definition and statement, it's basically saying, what bullying is, where it can happen, and what it looks like, and that we prohibit it basically. So this is that they're constantly adjusting this definition. And even though it's done again down here, this is something that is connected to from the attorney that we want to have in there.
So just about anywhere that our students are under our control.
Correct.
Correct. But as bullying from the bus stop until all day in school until they get home.
Correct. And basically what happens with the investigation portion is that and something can happen now. Just there's a lot more responsibilities, public schools outside of school, I'll say. So if something were to happen outside of school, not a school event, but that then comes in conversations, text messages, and that behavior continues. That can be part of the investigation too, and you can identify bullying through that as well. So it's not always, people always think it's just the school bus or it's just the classroom or just the playground, and It really can be anywhere. I mean, now it can be bullying can be done through text messages that are never done in school, but it impacts the students' really ability to participate in school safely. And so that's where why it's important to have those things in here.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
So if something happens outside of school, totally unschool related, but the effect of it carries over into school, then it still is the school's business to handle.
So even though the
Right.
whatever the situation was might not have happened in school, it is still considered to be something that is could be considered bullying. So yes. So it doesn't have to be that the whatever the situation was happened in school. It's that, listen, something happened between Brianna and Phil outside of school. We were at a sporting event, words were exchanged. We made threatening remarks. It continued the next day through text messages. And now Phil and Brianna are in the same classroom. And now there's the dirty looks, there's comments under the breath. Those things typically continue. If they don't, it's harder to, we'll put some strategies in place still, but it's harder to say it's bullying. That's part of the investigation, but it definitely could be because it can be brought into the building. That's the big challenge, is that when it can be brought into the building. If Phil and Brianna never see each other in school, we never pass each other, we're not in the same class, a lot of times that's going to be something that's a little, it's going to be a little less pertinent, if you know what I mean, because it shouldn't be impacting me in school, but that would all be part of the investigation as well.
If one
If-
or the other said something to a teacher, right, then even if it happened outside of school, it's a school issue. Is that correct?
It can be investigated. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
it's going to fall under bullying, but if someone doesn't feel safe in school, and they may feel safe in school and still report it, just so an adult knows, that would all be part of the investigation.
And if other children are talking about it, whether to the main people or in room or in background.
Right.
That
And
counts.
that's really where the electronic portion of bullying has changed. It's a game changer for schools, really, with the use of cell phones and how easy it is to say something that's just really not kind behind a screen. And then people talk, and that, it was between two people, and there's usually an audience, and then the audience is talking, and it just gets bigger and bigger. And so, again, we'll investigate those things as we're required to do.
Do we wait until it comes up to an adult or the staff overhears things, or shall we encourage parents to let us know if they think something's going on?
That's part of the what's in the regs. So there is, if anybody has a concern, it's basically the regulations have a big section of how to report. There's anonymous reporting. It can be an email to a teacher, and then it basically puts timelines on things. So how long, just for an administrator to say, hey, I'm doing an investigation, I have to gather some information, I will get back to you, but it puts a time frame on it. And one of the things that we have in our reg that I added, that was when you do an investigation, whether it's identified as bullying or not, we have it in our reg that we want to tell the parent whether it was yes or no. It might have been a mean behavior, but it might not be identified as bullying based upon this specific definition that you have to follow. But we still provide a communication out if it is or not. And again, you can see in I think this is the section that has it. These things here, like you have to, meet with parents, and that, you can see this 48 hours of completion of district's investigation to invite each one to attend the meeting. and they're separate meetings, they're not together. But this gives a general overview of it. The regulation is much more specific.
Mhm.
Phil, is there a way that the parent knows what's in the regulations? Like, how do they know that that is their right to call,
So
for
typically,
something like that?
yeah, when you see a policy, you would see, and this is not only, it's in, we'll call it shorthand in the handbooks, right? There's some information
Okay.
in the handbook that parents sign off on, but there's also, when you go into our policy section, you'll see it'll say bullying policy and then bullying regulation. So both are out there. It's not like it's a top secret. We can,
Mm.
the reg can be adjusted at any time, whereas the policy has to go through a board vote.
Now, Phil, in the case, if they're using technology or some kind of electronic device to bully another student, that's not under the control of the board, is it? I mean, we have control over our computers and some of our equipment, but isn't that private information, or private, not private information, but it's a private piece of property? Do we have any jurisdiction in regard to that? Bullying
So yeah, typically what will happen, Herb, is Phil's being mean to Herb. I send a text message that whether it's one or several, and you would be the one then, typically when you report it, you're showing your cell phone. You don't have to, if we don't know about it, we can't investigate it, right? But if you show that technology and it's impacting you in the school setting, that's something we would investigate, but we would need to see that. And oftentimes what happens is the other person will say, well, they only showed you, Herb was only showing you what he wanted you to see. And then the other person would say, look what Herb said to me. And there's usually two sides, to the story. So, but yeah, we do have to investigate those. If they don't want to share it, there's not much we can do if there's no grounds. And that happens sometimes. It becomes the he said, she said, and you're stuck. But it doesn't mean we still don't monitor, like, hey, if it's in the cafeteria, and we'll let someone know, keep an eye on these two students. We want to make sure if there's any interaction, we're aware of it. But technology does make it harder. They're not supposed to have their phones out in school, right? But let's face it, they are, we're typically talking about middle school students here. And sometimes they find a way. So if it's on a bus, they're responsible for their actions. Sometimes it can also, it could become harassment, depending on what it is. And it could become, some parents in the past, not necessarily here, but have gone to the police. And police will typically say, well, is the school taking care of it? And if we are, then they will try and get the parent back to the school level, but it's something they can address.
But it doesn't have to be that type of behavior to be bullying, does it? In other words, it could be perceived, or it looks like bullying is taking place.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, we have to try and figure out what their intention is, right? Sometimes that's hard. Sometimes things are said without, any thought behind it, and that's part of growing up and learning. And it's our job in our investigation to try and figure that out. Typically, the bullying, and that's why I say, was it mean-spirited, or was it bullying? And typically, bullying is going to be those things where it's like, every day I'm walking in and I'm, bumping into Brianna as I walk into the classroom, and I let her know I'm there. It could be a physical behavior. It could be any of those things. It could be, verbal. It could be no interaction. It could, because with electronic devices, right? There's so many things. And let me tell you, when we have these reports, they take a lot of time to investigate, because you need to be fair about it. and make sure both parties are heard.
And that's where you have that 48-hour timeline that you try to investigate it within that, investigate both sides within that time.
That we have to
Oh, we
tell
said-
them, we have to tell them after 48 hours, but typically, you know, the administrators are in touch with parents. You know, when we're doing an investigation, people know, teachers know. We'll talk to teachers. We'll talk to, you know, sometimes we'll talk to other students depending on the grade. And, you know, oftentimes it's private. So you might not even know, you know, hey, Brianna, the nurse wants to see you. And next thing you know, Brianna's in the principal's office just having a private conversation, so that, you know, it's, you know, Brianna doesn't become a target. We're very aware of those things, and trying to get information and protect kids is really what we're trying to do.
Good.
With all
It's
these,
been our, oh, sorry, go ahead.
go
Herb.
ahead, I'm sorry.
No, not at all.
Was it Brianna?
Go ahead. We're at a draw. Okay. So I like how the students are sometimes included in those conversations. Speaking from personal, we had a time where one of my children was offered the opportunity to speak to someone that she was having this sort of difficulty with, and she got to decide whether or not she confronted the person and had the conversation, and she chose to. And I was really proud of her. That's really great advocacy for one's self. But I like that they had that opportunity was there. And like you're saying about being discreet as far as having the student leave the classroom to have those conversations with administration, that's really good too. That's very thoughtful and mindful about our students.
I think those things need to be there for both sides, right? And
Mhm.
typically, if a student is being mean, there's something else going on. It's not that they want to be mean. It's typically it's a red flag. Something's going on in their life. And so, you know, we have an obligation to both students in that situation. And some students feel like, hey, I want the opportunity to talk to them, to let them know, like, look, you have no audience right now. Let's just have a real conversation. I don't want that to happen anymore. You know, whether or not they accept their apologies, up to them. But I think you have to empower someone that's been in that situation to help them out. And some students will take you up on it, and some want nothing to do with it. So but again, that's part of the process, whether it's training, you know, part of our kind of PBIS stuff, which is kind of COVID slowed down a little bit. It's definitely part of our SEL stuff with Second Step. And, you know, but it's, you know, it's why kids, I saw a thing today that I thought that was really interesting that was connected to this, that we were looking at this policy today. And it was a quote unquote new way to evaluate schools. And it was basically just go into a school and start charting the number of people that are smiling. And I thought it was interesting because people that are smiling are happy, typically want to be there. And, you know, connected to bullying, usually you're going to see whether it's, you know, typically the bully might not be happy, something's going on in their life, and you can see it on kids' faces. And it's, I don't know, it's just an interesting connection I made today when I saw that.
Now, Phil, you mentioned the fact that when a bullying incident does occur, then someone has to report it to either a teacher or administrator.
Correct.
And once it gets to the administrative level, then I assume that they start investigating the incident.
Correct.
And from my experience in hearing about these things, when the administrator hears about it, they have to investigate and so forth. Well, they have a million things that they're doing during the day, and this is just something else on top of that. And lots of times, the incident isn't taken care of instantaneously, and sometimes it drags out because it has to be documented, and you have to interview different people and so forth. And How is that handled in here? Do we have a timeline on, or a more efficient way of handling that type of situation?
Well, obviously, if it's student safety related, it becomes a priority right away, right? But if it's not a student safety meeting, it's words, it's something we have to investigate, but it's not something that we're gonna need to do right that second, depending on what else is going on. A lot of times that talk about mitigation strategies with COVID. Well, this is no different in bullying because you can put things in place even before you do your investigation. That's typically something that you're doing right away. As you start an investigation, you're going out to someone who's on recess duty, or you're talking to a lunch monitor, or you're talking to a bus driver and saying, "Hey, I'm investigating something. I would like to make sure that these students stay away from each other." And I would tell those two students that, as an administrator, it buys you time to be able to do your investigation. And typically, students, once they know, hey, the principal's checking me out, something's, I'm going to be on high alert, and that's the time where I'm either going to, do nothing, or typically it's going to be really slick, or through electronic communication. But we put those things in place to allow us to do our investigation. The other thing I'll say is oftentimes our school counselors and our school social worker also help with the investigation. They're not necessarily part of consequences because that's an administrator's job, but they can also help gather information for an administrator and part of an investigation, especially if the student we're concerned about it has a connection with that individual, because they may open up better with that individual. So those are all things that come into play as we go through this process. But typically, we'll put things into place before we even come to and they're temporary, but it's just to determine what's going on, what's the investigation going to yield.
I think it's good to involve the social worker and counselors too, because, the bullier may be in need of some special help. And that would be a great way to start that process if it's deemed that it's necessary.
Yeah. And again, the regs are what really drives this. There is some in this, in your policy about how to handle it. But if you see it in the policy, it's because it's required. So like the parent meetings, those are required. And oftentimes, even if it's not deemed to be bullying, we're still going to have a parent meeting or a discussion. It might be over the phone. It could be over Zoom, it could be in person. But we, to make sure that we're relaying information to them and it's not just an email, that we're following the law of what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, but it doesn't, as Ann mentioned, I don't think it's just the social workers that are involved in it, because on page 3, I like the statement where it states in the middle of the page, comprehensive safe school climate program involves everyone in the school and the community in addressing bullying in all school levels is essential for reducing incidences of bullying. Such a program must involve intervention at all levels, school-wide, classrooms, and individuals. So school climate and all of those things come into play in this issue.
For sure. For sure.
The board is not involved in this. Basically, we set the policy and the direction, and you may have some administrative plan to supplement this, but
Correct.
usually most of these are handled, aren't they, at the administrative level? Or
Yes. And I'm usually put in the loop if there's an investigation going on, or that's and I say bigger in nature, not that there's some that are, it depends on the severity of what's happening. And basically what happens, and this is it's an odd thing that's connected to the policy. A lot of people, you're supposed to have a list. And ironically, it's not really a list. It's kind of bizarre because it's a document that's available for people. It doesn't have the student's name on it. It just says verified case and the date. And that's really all it has on it. But it is everyone's job, Herb, and it is one of the reasons that we provide training on it each year, just to make sure people know, like, you have to address it. This is serious.
If we have a bullying case, do we have to report that to the State Department so they have a tally?
Excuse me. At the end of the year, when we report for our data, we do have to report the number of verified cases of bullying we have. Was there anything in red that was new? Sorry, I'm still recovering from being sick. Was there anything in red that was new that you had any questions about or concerns about?
I don't have red on my paper, really.
I mean, the red really was, you get the change in the definition on the first page here. A statement. The second page just added the definitions in this, what a school employee, they redefined what a school employee was, and they added in, oh, there's a quote missing there. Teen dating violence, they added that in, and that's actually directly out of the statute. And then instead of saying the district's plan, they've connected it to the Safe School Climate Plan. And then they've adjusted some of these.
If we do have a bullying situation, we don't have too many repeaters, do we? Because, or do they, some bullies bully all the way through school, and when they get to be adults, they continue bullying.
And typically what happens is it's year to year. And so, if there's a bullying investigation, because you report on a yearly basis, so your list kind of goes back to zero, but if Phil and Herb have had, notoriously had problems and, in classes together, we make efforts to make sure that Phil and Herb are not together in class. It's harder when you're a small district. Don't get me wrong. When I was in Tolland and you had 10 or 12 fourth grade classes, if two kids in a class were having problems and there was a verified act of bullying, we would move someone out of that classroom. And it was an effective measure. That's harder to do in a small district where you only have 1 or 2 or 3 classes, but it's something that we can do. We've added adults, adult supervision to students. We've added in, special passing time. There's 1,000 strategies that we can put in place to support students.
Now, we have a school climate plan at the top of page 5.
Yep.
Now, is that reviewed with the entire staff? Not only teachers, but others as well?
So they both have it in their handbooks.
Do they review it every year or just?
It's part of their, it's part of our training. So they have to, basically go through the various things that we have: bullying, suicide prevention, DCF, any of those things. Those are all connected to things that they get training on. Sometimes the training is simply them reviewing a policy and expectations. Depends on what it is.
Now, in prevention and intervention strategy, which is in the policy on the last page, you have school rules prohibiting it, and that'll be in the handbooks and so forth. But in number 3, I guess it is, adult supervision.
Yep.
Adult supervision of outdoor areas, hallways, cafeteria, and other specific areas where bullying is likely to appear. It would seem to me that at school especially, where we have multiple halls and stairways and cafeteria area, all that bullying would be easier there than in center school. And
Agreed. Although
and-
I'll tell you, there's a lot of cameras at Hall School.
yeah, probably.
And
But
the kids
when
are
you
very
list
aware of it.
hallways, cafeterias, and other specific areas, I would say hallways are pretty high, probably 40 or 50% of bullying occurs in that area. And in the cafeteria, certainly there might be, although there are teachers in that area as well. But classrooms, it would seem to me that if bullying is going to take place, it could take place just as much there as in a hallway or cafeteria, you know, even though there's a teacher person and maybe an aide.
Yeah, typically the more structured the activity, the less likelihood that the less structured the activity, such as transitions in hallways or, you know, the cafeteria, things like that, buses. There's a higher chance. But again, it's why we do all of our training with our kids. It's why we have an SEL program.
I'd like to see the classroom listed in there as well, because I think hallway is high and cafeterias certainly, but the classroom is probably high as well. I don't know about the outside playground areas and stuff like that, but you know, but it could occur anywhere, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Any other things with the bullying policy that anything you want to change?
Not change necessarily, but just one more question in regard to the prevention and so forth. We don't have too many repeat incidents. In other words, when you think of zero tolerance of something like this, and I don't know if there's anything in here on zero tolerance, I don't remember, but that's not the direction that we want to go with something like this. In other words, if we have bullying going on, we want to take care of it, re-educate the youngster, get them so that they don't bully anymore and they are better citizens and are respectful and helpful and have kindness toward the person they're bullying. Is that part of the plan? That we
Yeah. Yes, the kind of repairing the relationship is part of the regulation, and it's part of our SEL program. There are not a lot of repeat offenders. Oftentimes, a lot of people, once students know and parents are informed and strategies are put in place, there's not typically a lot of repeat offenders. I mean, it can happen for sure. However, when you put things in place and you do it well, and you know, you really figure out what the nature of the problem is and how to support students, typically it's not going to.
We're not expelling or suspending or isolating the youngsters.
There could be a suspension depending on, because obviously there's, you know, this is connected to discipline for sure. You know, you haven't had an expulsion hearing, obviously, so you haven't seen that. But any, you know, the majority of discipline like this, if it's severe enough and ongoing, it could move to expulsion, but it would have to be extremely severe. And, you know, blatant strategies are not being tried. You know, students out of control, it would have to be very, very severe. But there are disciplinary consequences for sure for students that are bullying others.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anna or Brianna, do you have any other questions? Or are you ready to move on to the next one?
I'm good, thank you.
I just get hung up on, I know it's not you or us. I know it's legal. That word repeated always gets a little fuzzy, I think, for people.
Where is it on this one?
Repeated
What
behavior.
page are you looking at?
It was the definition. Oh goodness. It was
Is
on
it
the
on page one?
definition.
On page one, Brianna, bullying means A, the repeated use.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. It has to meet all of those requirements. Is that right? Or just one? Because this sounds like it needs to be all of those things.
No, it's or.
Okay.
It does not have to be all those for sure.
Okay. I think repeated, like I said, I know it's not a us thing. I think that's a part of the legal definition of it. But I think that gets tricky sometimes.
I think what they did, Brianna, is it used to just be repeated, and then they added, I can't move my highlight, sorry. They added
Like
that
the
part B.
intensity or Mhm.
Yeah, because this here, one physical act or gesture, could now result in it. So it doesn't have to just be repeated. Typically, the repeated ones are under the radar, we'll say. That year it's the poking and it's the stop and it's the constant, I'm going to find that person in the hallway. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that repeated. That's why they separated them out.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
And we used to call this pre-bullying, and we've done this in several situations. And I know both administrators have had similar experiences and done similar things. And I say both administrators, meaning the principals. Whereas if you get mean-spirited behavior, and someone knows about it and it's reported, or a teacher sees it, and it's, there's going to be a trail of that. So Phil's being, mean to Brianna. We may say, hey, if that behavior continues, that's significant, and that could be considered bullying if it happens again. It might not be because it doesn't fall into any of these 5 items down to the bottom, because it's not, depending on the severity. But, if it's something I'm writing, I keep, dropping notes in your backpack that are just really mean, that, if it happens again, that's going to be considered bullying. So that's where it's like, you're trying to basically protect as early as you can. And,
Right.
that's the idea behind it.
I imagine that can become very overwhelming, particularly in the middle school.
That's why teachers addressing things early and often is really important. And it doesn't mean they're being mean about it. It's just that they're addressing it. And they might not, do it in class where someone might be embarrassed, but, they might keep Phil after class and say, hey, listen, I saw you drop that note to Brianna. That can't happen again. I'm going to let the principal know, but that behavior is not acceptable. You can't do that again. And here, if there's more to it, but the earlier you can catch those things, the more likely you can change it.
Right, and the goal is all about having positive climate for everyone.
That's right.
So it's not any kind of hunt of any sort. Yeah.
Right. Support for all. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay. Which one did I have next? I had reporting child abuse 5141. This one here. Okay. So again, you've got the legal language in there, the strikeouts. They added the section in here on mandated reporters, and who it is. And all I'm going to say to simplify what they have in the policy here legally is that if you are in the schools on a regular basis on our behalf, you're a mandated reporter. And so, that's the crux of it. If we have, someone that's coming in every week as a volunteer, we're going to have a conversation with them because they're acting on our behalf now. We want to let them know if they see something. And oftentimes what will happen is it's not that person that's reporting it. They're telling an administrator or a teacher. It's getting to the administrator or the school counselor they're doing gathering facts, and then they're the ones reporting. I will tell you that this is probably the most frustrating policy for families in cases where they think we're just overreacting, and the school district does not have the ability to do their own investigation unless it's done by a school employee, and it cannot hinder DCF's investigation. So we report things oftentimes going, we're not, this is what we know. And it is not our job to determine whether it's abuse or neglect. It is our job to report it. And sometimes things are taken up, cases are taken by DCF, and sometimes they are not.
If someone reports this, say a teacher does or one of the staff, they're protected, aren't they, from the law?
Yes, they are.
Even though it's not a child abuse case, they're still protected.
Correct. As long as they're telling what they believe is accurate. If they are, embellishing or, I don't want to say, people do some crazy things sometimes, but trying to get someone in trouble or a situation like that, that's where they're not protected. But, if they have, if they see something, and again, third hand typically doesn't count. We'll gather a little more information ourselves. But we're not responsible for doing a full investigation. The only time we do our investigations is when we have a school employee. And sometimes if there was something that happened, the board attorney would already know, they would be involved. And they may say, let DCF do their investigation first, and then you do your investigation afterwards. Because you can use the information that DCF has gathered.
Is that new health service group that we have in our schools now, are they aware of this?
They are mandated reporters themselves. Yes, they are.
So they're covered.
Yep. Yeah, and this is probably this used to be even less time, but now it's 12 hours. And DCF has added an electronic component for reporters to report things. It's 12 hours is not a lot of time. So, if something comes in through email and we don't have any information, and all we have is that email, sometimes it's reported to DCF and we'll just say, look, we can gather more information tomorrow, but they may want to act on it that night, depending on what's happening.
So what is that 48 hours with the written report? Is that from them or
So no,
is
it's
that from the
us.
district? Okay.
It's from us.
With
Yeah.
more
So
details.
there's a specific form that we have to submit. And typically if you do this electronically, that's the form.
Okay.
If you call in, you have to, follow through with that written report.
Okay, so it's 12 hours to notify and then 48 hours to submit this report with more detail.
Correct. And usually
Okay.
it's done the next day or even
Okay.
that day. We just follow up with it.
Mhm.
I actually like this addition, and honestly, oftentimes the people that are reporting are administrators or counselors. But they add this addition of you have to inform the building principal. I never liked when that wasn't in the policy, and the reason why is because as an administrator, if there's a report because someone's second grade teacher's a mandated reporter, they see something or they hear something, they call DCF, they make the report, they go home, and the principal knows nothing about it. That wasn't good practice. And so, typically now, it's always the principal or an administrator that's reporting. The teacher may be the person that saw it and or will help them make the report. But they have to notify the principal of the building.
I also think it's good for the teachers if the principal files the report with the teacher, you know, I think that there's a certain protection for the teacher within that too. Do you know what I mean? To do it
For
in
sure.
collaboration with the principal.
For sure, and it's comfort, you know, I mean, they
Mhm.
feel like it's their leader and that their leader's working there with them.
Mhm.
This is one I will say that's in our policy, it's part of the law, that I will say is not always followed. But I would hope it's always followed, but it's not as it's not done as well as it should be, let's say. And this is only when it's done by a school employee. So if the, you know, the investigation of child abuse or neglect is against the school employee, they have to notify my office. I have heard some other superintendents say that I never even got a report. I had to reach out to them. And a lot of times it's just because DCF is so overwhelmed too. It's not a shot at them. It's just that, you know, we want that information, you know, so we know what the outcome was.
I think it would be good that all reports, you're aware of all reports at the superintendent's office, you know?
I am, the administrators tell me if there's a, and again, we're small. That's what allows this to happen.
Mhm.
I know when there's a DCF call. I'm very aware of that. And so they just, you know, they'll give me some brief details just so I have some of the information. And sometimes we have to problem solve too. You know, what are we going to do if, you know, if it's a parent, what are we going to do if they show up to school? How will we handle that? You know, we process through those things ahead of time too. And this is a training. Brianna, do you guys use the online training, the portal? Yeah, we do too.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, so they have basically an online system now. This is one of the things that my office is responsible for, is making sure that all of our, you know, our employees that are directly impacting with working with kids in schools have followed that training. And Brenda has a spreadsheet that they have that completed. They have to send their certificate to us. So
The thing I wish they had more of, and this comes, of course, from personal professional experience, is actually support for the reporters, because it can be very difficult to make these reports or to participate in these investigations. And that's one reason why having a staff member with someone else to do the report, like an administrator, is helpful, because it's hard to keep your emotions in check when, for example, you're sending a child home not knowing what's going to happen that evening. I wish there was a peace of mind act or something so that the people who have to do these things have a little bit of support also, because that can be hard.
yeah, for sure.
I mean, we're professionals, but we love our kids.
Well, and it's also why I know when they happen, because even for the administrative team, when they make a phone call, you know, it's they need to process too, and I'm typically that ear. So.
I think it's also hard for the teacher too. I know in my past experience with the parents, because there can be that blaming thing from the
Sure.
parents that you're the one that reported. And so that creates a certain awkwardness that's really hard, you know, when you're trying to maintain this really positive relationship with your parents.
Right, and DCF does not want you to tell, you know, sometimes you have to report something and you don't, you know, you just feel like there's no way in the world this is real or it's true, but you're obligated to report it. But DCF does not want you to call that family and let them know. And so typically, you know, it's one thing we actually recently were talking about this, and we were talking about updating our handbooks, and we were haven't done it yet. We were talking about for next year, going back through this section of the handbook about reporting, just to make sure families know that we don't get to do the investigation. We don't have a choice. We're, you know, if we're going to make make a determination of whether or not to call, if we're even thinking about it, we're making the call. And you know, it's a matter of, I could lose my job if I don't. You know, when people hear that, and we're going to try and clarify that, because it's kind of one of those things. Obviously it's scary. If DCF were to knock on my door, I think I'd be a little nervous. Right. And because you're protective of your kids. But you would want to, I think the more information up front we can have for families, so they understand the process and what we are required to do beyond this policy, right? They're not coming to our policy. I think that would be important. So
At what point is the parent called?
So,
Or does DCF call the parent, or?
yeah, typically it's going to be DCF. They're going to go to the home, or they're going to call the parents. You know, sometimes depending on the situation, and if it's a student and they're in school and we hear something, we may make the phone call before that kid even goes home, and DCF may say, do not let that student go home. You're going to keep them. And we stay with that student until 5, 6, 7 o'clock. Typically the parent is at the school and waiting, but they're not with their child, and DCF will do an on-site investigation and evaluation right then and there to determine, is it safe for that student to go home with their family, parents, whoever it is. And if not, is there someone they can send them with, and they set parameters. And but that's not, again, our responsibility. But you know, we've had administrators have to stay super late, just for them to, you know, they'll say, look, that's serious. We want to be able to find out before we send them on the bus. So
It is a good policy though, because it gives the children protection from abuse and neglect and everything else that goes with it. And who better to have them pick up on it would be a teacher who
right.
has them for some time, and should, you know, if they see some bruises and cuts or whatever on a child, they are in a position to take care of it right away.
Right.
You know,
The hard thing about sorry, Herb, the hard thing about DCF, the Department of Children and Families, that little acronym just has such a negative connotation too.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it doesn't need to, because you can call DCF yourself to try and get support and services yourself. It doesn't have to be negative. So that's the other part of the spin, to say, look, you can self-refer if you need help with something. It doesn't necessarily, it's different than reporting child abuse, right? That's not what I'm talking about. But trying to get people to understand that they're there to help kids. And that is the bottom line, Herb. For sure, is trying to help kids. Keep kids safe.
Keep them safe.
Yep. Okay, so anything else, anything you want to adjust in this policy or change? Again, this is one that every year I think they make an adjustment to, and if they make an adjustment with language, we'll have to update it again. But that's a big update.
Yeah.
What's that?
It looks okay to me.
Okay. All right, let's go to the last one then. All right, so this is under students, the sexual discrimination and sexual harassment. And this is among students, okay? So this is a biggie. I have to make sure, I'm not sure we have regs yet, but when this gets published, we'll make sure there's regs. We do have regulations for personnel, but I don't have the regs yet, I don't think, for students. They might at the middle school just because of the case, but I'll have to look at that. But this was cleaned up, and again, legal, you know, trying to identify what is happening where, and then updating the cases. So, and you can see again, there's the connection, right? So this could also be bullying. Depending on what it is, it could fall under different things. Questions about any changes in there, or?
Phil, I'm trying to see the definition in the red part of the definition. Okay, I think it's a little, bring it down just a tad. Oh, thank you. Okay.
Yep, you're welcome.
I'm so glad to see that word unwelcome before conduct
Mhm.
has been taken out.
Yeah, they put it on its own down here,
Mhm.
but that it doesn't have to be that now. It can fall, so it could be in here, right? But it doesn't have to be unwelcome. I agree. Just it needed to be in a different spot.
Yeah, I'm glad for that.
I know the last time we talked about this policy, I don't remember who was on the group. We went kind of round and round about number 4. And there's so many things, it's just examples of it. So it's not necessarily, what's all the things that are there, but it's, again, from the attorney.
Mm.
So
Is it-
it could be more than what is listed.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So they put this, they wanted to have some samples or examples in here, and they have the examples, but if you take this away for a second and you just said this, I mean, that right there, conduct of a sexual nature which substantially interferes with the student's learning. That to me, a ton of things. It doesn't, could fall under
Yeah.
that if they didn't necessarily fall under number 4, if you know what I mean.
Mhm. That's true.
So how does what number 4 begin? Because we've deleted examples of specific behaviors. Does it just start with the touching?
You know what I'll do is I'll write examples may include.
Thank you. Okay, just to make it a sentence.
Yep.
Okay,
Mhm.
and that may include is good because it's not exclusive.
Correct.
Okay.
We get to make the determination if it's sexual in nature.
Okay. And trying to see 5. So 5 is social media.
Yeah, it's the electronic portion, really.
Okay.
And this complaint procedure needs to be built out further. It's pretty generic on here. It's just a show. A lot of times in policy, you'll see that it'll say something like, process or complaint procedure like that. It's meant to be simple just to show that there's a procedure, and the reg would have more information. Any questions, comments, concerns about this one?
So the staff development is kind of combined with the bullying.
It is. It's all connected now.
Mhm. Okay.
The high schools do a lot more with teen dating and violence, but there are sections for the middle school, and there's definitely parts in the SEL program. So are you in a place, do you think, where we could push these 3 policies to the full board?
Phil, I think one thing we need to do is to somehow transmit it to everyone so they can read the black and the red.
Oh,
'Cause
this
the
is
red
exactly how it
Yeah,
would go.
I can't read it online so much though. Could those who need pick up a copy that
Definitely.
has the black and the red?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
Yeah,
just
it's
to
so
be
much
sure, like,
easier if you can't see where the changes are, it's a nightmare to determine.
Yeah, and the red is the most important, and that's what
Right.
I don't have on my paper.
Yeah, no, we
So
can
I-
definitely do that. And I'll make a note, Ann, on mine just to say, invite BOE to get color copies if needed.
Okay, I just don't do as well reading it on the screen.
I can't proofread on screen. I have to print it. I've gotten better
Is
at
this,
it. Google, but
sorry,
go ahead, Brianna.
does this include gender identification things?
Hmm.
Is there a place for that somewhere?
Seems like
It-
it would fit under sexual harassment.
Well,
I think that there might be more information under discrimination.
Hmm.
yeah. I'm just wondering if that goes with this topic.
Do we want to include that somehow in number 4, examples may include?
I would ask the attorney that question, to be honest with you.
Okay,
Could you find out about that, please? Yes.
Yep.
Be-
And if there is
where did I
something,
see?
if there's something, I'll share it that night. Tell me the question again you want me to ask her.
Oh, boy. Does this include discrimination or harassment of students regarding their gender identification? I'm not sure if that's the best term. It's eluding me right now. And then it says something about how is denied participation in or the benefits of any education program receiving federal financial assistance. So what would we be doing? What's a program we would be doing that does not get federal financial assistance?
None. We get federal funds.
See, I was
Everything.
gonna say, somebody's gonna read that and be like, well, what is the thing where people can get away with this? Okay, everything is.
We get Title I
right.
funds. We get lots
Okay.
of federal funds.
So it's everything, sports and drama and music and everything we do. Okay. But I do think that is an important topic.
Yep.
Keeping
I will
an eye
ask
out.
that specifically.
Okay. And I don't know, bathrooms come to mind. Bathroom use, determination of bathroom use, that kind of thing would fall under that.
Let me see how other people are doing that.
Okay, I'll ask my
See if
children
there's
to
any
give me better
information
vocab.
on cable or where that's at.
the other question I would have, gender identification and orientation, are those
Yeah.
different?
Yes,
Should both be included?
and
I'm
I
just
think
gonna ask
sex
her
is a
if this
different
is
word.
the policy. I'm gonna ask her if this is the policy where that stuff should be,
Okay,
Okay,
because it doesn't have to be sexual. It could just
Right.
be discrimination.
yes. Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah, and those two things are different.
okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anything else for these 3 policies?
Is there a different one for adults, staff?
Yes.
And does it address staff and staff
I
student?
I think it's coming. I had a whole list of policies that we're going through. I think the next week, I think we have some students that are going to join us. Some middle school students are going to go through the dress code policy with us
Mhm.
next week. That'll be the first policy we'll go through. They're going to do a little presentation and talk about how the work that they've done. They have a draft policy that I'll send out to you. And then I know we have a bigger physical restraint policy that needs to be updated. I'll get that out to you, and that's also redlined. But I have to look to see what others. There's a couple that are really priority right now. And those are some of the ones that are on that list. But I'm going to say the more legal policies that have updates, I want to make sure we get those done and off to the full board.
Mhm.
But you guys are okay with, as long as we answer the questions to find out about gender identification, orientation, kind of discrimination around that. Does it fall under the sexual discrimination and harassment policy, or is it someplace else? And the minor changes we made, I think I added one word in for her, but for classrooms, and then I added in the examples may include on this policy. If we do
Mhm.
that, we can get these to the board and offer a read next meeting.
Yes.
Sounds
Good for you?
Mhm.
Sounds good? All
Mhm.
right, thanks for being so
Sounds
productive.
good.
I will get the next set of policies out to you. And we're on again for next Monday at 7 PM again. That works?
Mhm.
Um,
That's what I had on our schedule. 28, 4, and 11.
7 o'clock.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
All right.
And then, so when is a good time to pick up that day? If I were to pick up the paper
Oh, we'll have them
copies?
before. We'll have them before. Just contact Brenda. You can ask anytime.
Okay, very good. I'll give her a call and then pick up, find a
Yeah,
good time to
and
pick up.
if we're not here, you want to pick it up later, she leaves folders outside all the time for people.
Okay,
Like Donna will come and pick things up in after hours, and we just leave the folder for her.
okay.
So
All
Can
right,
that
thank
stuff
you.
go home with kids, or is that rule breaking?
we can put it in a folder and seal it up for you. Yeah, we could do that.
Okay.
Yeah, just tell Brenda what you're looking
If
for,
ever.
and she'll set you up.
Okay. Sounds
Okay.
good.
All
Well,
right.
we can
All
come
right.
up at the office, right?
What's that? Oh yeah, you can definitely pick them up here too. That's fine.
No, when, Wednesday?
You know what? I'm going to meet with her tomorrow morning. We'll go through tonight's meeting, and I gotta pull the next policies for that we're going to review next week, and they'll probably be ready for you tomorrow. To be honest with you, I just need to pull them and make sure we're on track for what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right. So thanks. So we can adjourn at 8:07 PM. I'm going to stop recording.